Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tier 2 Talk, the Australian Championship. My name is Keen McKenna, and welcome back for our February episode. We're doing this new style for these opening months of 2026, in where we're just going to be looking at the overall month of NPL football, while NPL is not kind of, the main talking points or the main headlines at the moment. We're just going to be doing these monthly episodes, recapping news, fixtures, results, anything regarding the Australia Championship and sequentially the NPL systems that eventually make up the Australia Championship at its current form. So, this is actually the second time I'm recording this episode. I have to apologize. For yesterday, I was doing this exact same time as yesterday. It's coming up now almost at 2 o'clock my time when I'm recording this, and recorded it yesterday, finished an hour-long episode, did all my chatting and ranting and everything, pressed stop on the record, only to realize that no audio had been collected, and not even to the extent of a whisper. Like, I generally could not even hear myself at all. Like, there was just no audio being collected by anything. So that was great, and now I'm stuck here, well, not stuck here, but having to do this recording again. So for you guys, it's the first time you guys get to listen to my lovely voice in February and listen to the chat that we're going to go into. But for me, this is the second time I get to do it. So hopefully it's better than my first time. Bit more, presenter-like, and my points come off a bit better off the tip of my tongue. But yeah, we're going to go into this new episode. So what we've got in store for you, we posted our little guide on our Instagram and Twitters on Tuesday about what this episode holds. So we're going to start off with some NPL action review. So NPL has gotten back up underway in New South Wales and Victoria. They're 2-3 rounds in. Queensland and Northern New South Wales started up just the weekend gone. So we've got a little bit of talking points about them. So we're going to look into the foundation clubs of the Australia Championship and look into what they've been doing over the course of the opening month of NPL action. We'll talk briefly about Queensland and New South Wales, and that's going to be our recap for February there. We will then go into what is a working title segment. It's called Winners and Losers of the Month, this being February. Now, this could change. Winners and Losers, very colloquial and basic in my opinion, but it gets the message across. We're going to look at the teams that I thought had a great month and the teams that underperformed when it came to the month of February. So we're going to be doing that as well, get my opinions on that and to what clubs, really thrived over the course of the month. And that's kind of one of the benefits of doing a monthly episode instead of a weekly or fortnightly thing. We get to look at the clubs as a whole performance over the month instead of breaking them down individually week by week. We'll then go into our first little news segment. It's where we'll talk about the early impacts of the Australia Championship. Not only have we seen a increase in crowds at the NPL level, we've also seen a lot of players who participate in the opening season of the championship make moves and make big transfers to other clubs. So that's a real benefit there, and we'll talk about the benefits and the long-term benefits that could have for not only the championship or NPL, but also the whole of the Australian footballing ecosystem. We'll then go into our March preview, in where we have South Australia and Western Australia back into action this coming weekend. So they'll come straight into the fold, and we'll talk about the big games coming up in those two competitions. NPL Tasmania is coming back not this weekend, but next weekend, so the 7th of March. So we'll talk about that opening game then, what to expect from the Apple Isle. And then we'll go through the notable fixtures week by week this coming weekend, but then also over the next few weeks as well. And then finally, it's been the talk of the town. It's been making news and headlines in Australian football, especially on my Instagram, my Twitter, probably you guys as well if you are staying in the loops and stuff like that across social media. And it's the wonderful age-old talk about promotion and relegation in Australian football. Massive place for this conversation, and it's been spurred to life by Football 360 and Bruce Media. So we're going to be talking about what they're talking about and what they're aiming to do, and then hopefully we'll have a discussion about what this means for the Oz Championship, what that can play in those roles, and then also some other questions that I have about promotion relegation, and just voice facts rather than just me stating how I think it should work and this and that. But that will be towards the back end of the episode. So I hope you guys are excited for that. We are getting underway here, and we'll start off with our NPL action review. So like I said, NPL New South Wales and Victoria are up and running. So that's where we'll start. We'll start in Victoria, and the best team that had the best month in February was Preston Lions. They had 2 wins to start off their new season. However, they remain on 0 points. How, you may ask? Coming into this new season, Preston Lions had a 6-point deduction put on them before the start of the season. It was them and Dandenong City that faced point reduction from Football Victoria coming into this new season. It was around fan violence and fans not behaving at their semi-final clash last year, or the elimination one of the finals games. There was some fan violence, some flares, stuff like that. So they started this season off with 6-point deduction. So they've won 2 games, but they sit on 0 points. Now, I think it's a great thing, and we'll go into it a little bit later when it comes to the wins and losers of February, but I think it's a great thing for Preston, for Zoran Markovski and this new look Preston side, that they've been able to get rid of that 6-point deduction straight away, and now they can focus coming into March about building those points. They got some big games coming up in March, so it'll be a good stepping block that they've got rid of those 6 points, got rid of the news and everything surrounding that, and they can now build up into this new month. On the flip side, you have Avondale, who are 0 wins from 2. A horrendous start for the Avengers. Lost convincingly to South Melbourne in round 1. They lost 2-0 away from home. And then they came back home against Bentley Greens, and they lost 2-0 there as well. So not the best of start for Avondale there. Jonathan Jamato, his first season, NPL season, I should say, in charge of Avondale. He took over coming into the championship, so it's a new task for him. He's lost majority of that premiership winning side that won it all last year, so he's still rebuilding, and I think still finding out who this new Avengers team is, but obviously it's not the best start for them. South Melbourne, they had a fairly decent start, 1 win, 1 loss. Looked very good against Avondale in week 1, but were very poor against Hume City the weekend just gone. They left it too late against Hume. They didn't have a shot on goal in that opening 45 minutes against Hume City at home. And then they were 2-0 down. They got 1 back around the 75th minute mark or something like that. But ultimately just left it too little too late. But, I think for South Melbourne, that's a positive start. They've been continuously going. They won the championship, obviously, in December. Had probably a few weeks off for Christmas, and then they were back into action with the OFC Pro League as well. And now they've got the NPL commitments coming back into the fold as well. To update you about the OFC and what South Melbourne are doing in that league, they most recently had a 1-1 draw against Auckland FC last Saturday night with a 90 minutes stoppage time equaliser. So they drew a good point there at Olympic Village. They're currently sitting second behind Auckland by 4 points, though they do have a game in hand on the league leaders. So, if they win that one, they're 1 point off Auckland. I think you got to be top 4 to make kind of the next stage of this league. And, most notably, they are the only team left undefeated in that competition. So that's something that they'd be proud of. But I think, as I said yesterday when I did this first iteration of this episode, I think for South Melbourne, their priorities have to lie with the OFC Pro League. Yes, they have people have been asking how they are going about this and how they are going to, commit to both OFC Pro League and the NPL. I've been told they have a 32-man squad for this scenario. So they are very well switched on, and they have the players and the means to do this. But I think obviously being in this OFC Pro League first year, I think a $450,000 prize money on the line as well. They have to be realistically going for that, or at least in my mind going for that, because NPL, you're already in the Oz Championship come the end of the season. Realistically, you just have to be in that top 6 scenario come August, and then you get to play finals football and then fight for the NPL Victoria there. You're already in the Australia Cup round 32, so you don't have to worry about any of the major cup competitions or tournaments in Australia at the moment. I think if they're able to, get a month like they did in February, 1 win, 1 loss, get their wins where they can, suffer a few losses because of player fatigue or different squads or different players, so be it. But I think ultimately, if they're able to compete on this OFC Pro League and do well in that, and then I think this ends in May or June, and then come June, July, go heavy back in on the NPL side, make that top 6, and then finals, it's anyone's game as well. So I think for South Melbourne, that's going to be their way forward. I don't think they're not going to have a season last year. Hopefully they won't. In where they were in a relegation battle for a few weeks there, managed to climb up. I think they're very well switched on. They're very well aligned to what they want, and they have the means and the people to do just that. To wrap up our NPL Victoria talk, we have to notify who is the league leaders, and it's none other than the Australia Cup finalists from last year, Heidelberg United. They're currently leading the league after 2 games with 2 wins from that. So Heidelberg currently holding that Australia Championship position in Victoria. Moving to New South Wales now, and Marconi and Sydney United are the best 2 teams in the state at the moment. 3 wins from 3 for the 2 bitter rivals who are occupying first and second in the NPL New South Wales. Most impressive wins for the side, Sydney United. Their one was against Sutherland Sharks in round 2. I was at this game doing the match report for NPL New South Wales, and the thing that made this impressive is they went down to 10 men just before the halftime stoppage. Their captain, Vlad Ilichka, got a straight red card in like the 42nd minute. They then managed to play the whole second half with a man down, but also it was 1-1 at that point in the game when the red card was brandished. So 1-1, coming to the second half, they get that goal. They go 2-1 up, and then they're able to hold off a very persistent and naggy Sutherland Sharks side for the whole second half, which I think is very impressive. And of course, they have new coach in Miro Vladilichka in charge as well. So I think it's a great start for Sydney United, who, didn't get the best publicity or portray the best image of themselves in the Australia Championship last year, but it's a great start for them in the NPL New South Wales. For Marconi, on the other hand, Peter Sikan is still in charge there of the Bosley Park team, and their most impressive win, they've had a good month in my opinion. Marconi, they probably had one of the toughest schedule. They had Appia round 1, Rockdale away round 2, and Wollongong away round 3, and they've come away with 3 wins from 3. So I think it's a great start for the Stallions. The most impressive wins, I do have to say, is the one against Rockdale in round 2. 4-1 winners on the day. Last year, they were winning games by 1 goal, 1-0s, 2-1. They'd get that goal, but then they'd rely heavily on that very solid defense. This year, the attack is looking good so far. They've got 10 qual in from Sydney Olympic. Damien Sakanis is doing well. Marko Jesic is always there playing as the number 10 there. So I think their attack is looking better early on in this new season, Marconi. So I think it's a good start for them, and I'm excited to see whenever that original rivalry between Marconi and Sydney United does pop up on the fixtures list. Sydney Olympic and Appia are very similar to Marconi and Sydney United in where they're very similar in what they've done in the month of February, very up and down. Olympic started off with a rough 3-1 loss to Blacktown City. They bounced back with a 5-1 win over 10-man UNSW. And then they had a 2-0 lead in the weekend just gone in their game against St. George City. But they not threw it away, but they ended up having a 2-2 draw in that one. So 1 win, 1 loss, 1 draw. Now, new coach there as well for Olympic, so still trying to find their groove and a very different looking team. Yes, they've kept Ziggy Gordon at the back as captain and that experience there, but you don't look at that Olympic team and you can rattle off all the names. It's still like figure out who's the guys there at Sydney Olympic, who's going to be that main man for Sydney Olympic going forward. If you look at the results, a 3-1 loss to Blacktown, yes, a bigger scoreline, but you probably wouldn't have favoured Sydney Olympic in that game. You probably would have gave Blacktown the 3 points if you were tipping the game. UNSW, they were 1-0 down, and then UNSW got the red card, so went down 10 minutes, and then that's where Sydney Olympic took over. Should have won that game regardless of the 10 men or anything. And then St. George, I actually thought they were going to win that game 2-0. They looked very good in that first half, and I thought they would hold on. And I was kind of shocked when that result came back and it was 2-2. So if they won that game, I think it's a completely different story for Olympic. And we go, yeah, it's a pretty good month for February. They probably exceeded. Where now you're like, yeah, they get a pass kind of thing for the month of February. Appia, on the other hand, not the strongest of starts for the current champions. Lost in the Derby d'Italia round 1 to Marconi 2-1. They beat current premiers NWS Spirit 3-2 in round 2. And then it was a very competitive game in Manly. The weekend just gone, I watched this one on the Friday night. Led 1-0, but then dropped 2 goals in the space of 10 minutes in the second half. And then they needed one of their teenagers, I forgot the name, but an 86-minute goal to secure a 2-2 draw. So you look at Appia, losing to Marconi is never good. For Appia, they got to win the Derby d'Italia, so they probably write off that one. Came back strong against Spirit. Manly, you probably say again, they should have won that game. At least they got a point from that. So not the strongest of start, but then also you could tie into the fact that some of these players are still struggling with not jet lag, but lag over from the Australia Championship, that very long season in where you played a full 30-round competition plus Australia Cup plus Australia Championship game, and then you only had they went out in the quarterfinals, so they had the rest of November, so probably half of November, all of December, and then Franco Parisi was saying that they'd back in training come January, so really only a month and a half off till pre-season started. So you might see some of these teams lag into this new NPL season, but then they pick up that form over time. So could be the issue here for Appia. We'll see how they go in the month of March. Rounding out our NPL New South Wales talk, and it's a rough start for Wollongong Wolves. Luke Wilkshire in charge there for the Wolves. They beat New Boys UNSW in round 2 with a 2-1 win there, but either side of that have lost to Marconi and St. George. Now, you could argue that Marconi and St. George are currently sitting second and third, so it's not a horrific loss or anything like that for Wollongong or a surprise loss. But again, you always expect more from Wollongong, such a big club, such a big region. You expect them to do well. So hopefully this is, like I said, just a slow start. But you do wonder where the goals are going to come from. They lost Nick Olsen, the league's most valuable player from last year, to Sutherland Sharks. They still got Lachlan Scott, Alex Masavecchio, and Hernandez, some really good attackers there. But you just wonder how they're going to link up and find that missing piece that Olsen does leave there. Looking at the other state NPLs to wrap up our February overview, Queensland, Moreton City blew away Gold Coast Knights on opening night with a 4-1 win. So that's a great start there for the defending premiers. And then in northern New South Wales, current premiers Broadmeadow Magic lost 1-0 to last year's runner-up Edgeworth Eagles over the weekend. So a big surprise there for Broadmeadow. Edgeworth, they were fighting tooth and nail all the way throughout the season last year. So for Edgeworth to get that one over Broadmeadow on the opening night is great for them. However, it is Lantern Jaffers who currently sit top of the northern New South Wales at the end of February after they had a 5-0 win to start off their new season. So that wraps up our overview of the February action for all the foundation clubs and the various NPL competitions, and it leads perfectly into our new segment, Winners and Losers, this one of February, of course, and where I pick teams, whether it's 1 team, 2 teams, 3 teams, 6 teams that have done exceptionally well in their class in the winners category, or it could be one down in the losers category who didn't do the best, and what areas they need to improve on to have a better month going into the new one. So in terms of winners, I've got 3 clubs that are in my winners category, and it's the clubs that are currently undefeated, perfect to start the month of February and the new NPL season. That's Sydney United, Marconi and Preston. Really good form from all of them. Sydney United, Marconi hosting very good wins in their respectable opening 3 rounds. Preston, like I said at the start of the episode, it's very good for them to get rid of that 6-point deduction, and now they can build forward going with Zoran Markovsky, Aiden Bryce, some of these big Avondale players and names that have made the cross to Genesee Steel Stadium, and now they can start building on some points and tallies. They do have some big games coming up in February. We'll talk about that in our March preview, but it is going to be an interesting month for Preston. Sydney United, Marconi, just keep doing what you're doing, and again, they have some big games coming up as well. Losers for the month of February, and it's the team that has no wins to their name at the moment in Avondale FC. You expected more from the reigning premiers of Victoria. However, you do have to acknowledge that they have lost a large portion of last year's side that did win the premiership there. So you have to give some grace to new coach Jonathan Germano in his first season in the NPL Victoria. However, having no points after 2 games is not a good look. And I don't think you can start finding out who you guys are until you get that first point or first win on the board. Once you get that first win up and going, then you can start building, keep doing what you're doing. But I think the pressure will continue to grow. And it could be, they could prove me all wrong. They'll come out this weekend, get 3 points on the board, and then problem solved, and they can start building in March there. But just, it's a wary sign of, if you don't win this week, then it's 3 losses in a row. And then how long do you go to get that first win? And then only after that first win can you start going, all right, let's keep doing this or keep doing that or change that. Until then, you're going to be getting more pressure and more questions about this Avengers side. The first bit of news and kind of talking points I wanted to talk about in this episode is the early impacts of the Australia Championship. After only 1 season of the Australia Championship, it's already showing its effect in the Australia football, both in the higher and lower divisions across the whole ecosystem. And I use season as in quotation marks because it wasn't so much of a season, more as a post-season tournament. Now, you could only imagine what the benefits could be when it goes into a home and away season, if that is ever to come to fruition. But even just this end of season tournament, like we saw with the Champions League model and stuff like that, we're seeing a lot of positive effects both in the A-League and also in the NPL in the lower divisions. So if we start off with the A-League, you had 10 out of the 16 players who had signed professional contracts and moved up in the world of football. 10 of them went to the A-League, including Ali Algwal, who was the Golden Boot winner for Sydney Olympic. He moved to Central Coast Mariners, and he's made an instant impact. He scored multiple goals in multiple games for the Mariners, including one just this weekend gone against the Wanderers. You've also had Ollie Laval, who has made games and minutes and goals for Central Coast Mariners as well. And then you're even seeing players like Luke Tevere or James Hilton making these even later moves. Luke Tevere moved from Avondale to Preston, looking to start up the NPL Victoria season. And then just only a few weeks ago, he got signed by Perth Glory, and then he made his starting debut just the weekend gone. James Hilton, he's made the move to Auckland FC. So you're seeing a lot of these Oz Championship players who excelled in the Championship and made names for themselves. They've earned that move up into the A-League. And it's showing that the Oz Championship is kind of this nice shop window for these A-League clubs. Instead of having to look at individual NPL clubs or scouts or anything, they can just focus on the Championship, find the players that suit their system or have a really great performance, and they can add them into their squad. And I think it's a great thing for players, and we can see the players are starting to benefit from the Oz Championship. I remember reading an article last year with Joey Lynch. He interviewed the former GM of the Australia Championship, Nate Godfrey, and one of the things that they talked about in terms of how do you measure success after this first season of the Championship, and one of them was player signings. And I think we are seeing a great return on effort or return on profit by the players who committed to the Oz Championship, play in the Oz Championship, and they've earned bigger and better moves for themselves and for their careers. So I think in that asterisk, it's a definite tick in terms of a pass or failure in terms of the Oz Championship. It's done its job. Players are earning professional contracts. We've also had players move to Canada, to the Middle East, OFC Pro League. There's a lot of players that were part of this inaugural Australia Championship that have earned bigger and better things. In terms of the NPL, if you want to look lower down, we're seeing an increase in crowds and numbers and content and production levels in the NPL. In New South Wales, where I'm from, Sutherland Sharks and Rockdale Illidan have recorded record crowd numbers just in the opening 3 rounds. Rockdale, I think, recorded a crowd of 1,500. Sutherland, they recorded back-to-back weeks of nearly 1,600 people at the games. So you're seeing this knock-on effect of interest in the NPL level, people wanting to get more associated with lower league clubs and more local clubs as well. But most notably, hats off have to go to Preston Lions. Foundation Club, they had a great Australia Championship in terms of the crowd numbers, not so much as results on the field, missing the knockout stages, but their opening game last weekend, they got 4,679 people into the gates for their first NPL game of the season. Now, that's a great return. People have bought into the Oz Championship. They got similar crowds in the Oz Championship, and now they've moved across into the NPL sphere. Now, for Preston, and they seem very switched on, I'm sure they will, focus on retaining those crowds, but then also building them as well. They've been known to get 9,000 for those big games against South Melbourne. So why not try and make this a weekly thing of 4,000, 5,000? It's better than some of the A-League crowds. If you look at some of the worst A-League crowds from this season, that number beats it. So it just shows that there is a return on investment if you're looking from a Preston point of view. They built their way up from VPL 2 seasons ago, returned to the NPL last season, into the Oz Championship, and now they gain these crowds on a consistent basis. So I think if you add more visibility and more brand awareness and viability between the clubs, the Oz Championship, and everything in between, I think there is a real market and room to grow for the clubs, for the brand, for the league of the Oz Championship, and keep building on the success. The other thing I want to point out is how many little documentaries are being made and followed in this kind of Welcome to Wrexham style, or, just documentaries of clubs like Arsenal and Spurs have done in the past. I think I saw one for Peninsula Power up in NPL Queensland. They're doing one. I know Sutherland Sharks are doing one. South Melbourne did one for the OFC Pro League. And so there's so much content, and people are learning more and more and investing more and more time into these clubs, into these state clubs, because there's a little bit of excitement about it, because there's a buzz, because they know that they could possibly play in the Oz Championship and play for national glory one day. So I think there is this remarkable opportunity, and I want to stress opportunity, to grow the Championship and Australian football, and possibly do something with these clubs that, have put in the time, have put in the effort to grow, to sustain in this state environment and grow forward as well. So that's why I want to talk about the early impacts of the Championship, and we'll obviously talk more about what to do for the Championship moving forward into year 2 later down the track, and get some other people's opinions about what went well in year 1 of the Oz Championship and what needs to be improved as well. But so far we're seeing a great impact of the Championship. Now, we move into our March preview segment of the show. It's where we talk about the notable headlines that you have to watch out for coming into the month of March, and then we'll go week by week in terms of what fixtures caught my eye when I went through the fixtures list, and which ones you should be taking particular notice of, and why as well. So in terms of headlines for the month of March, like I said at the top of the episode, South Australia and West Australia NPL are back in action this weekend. So those states are going to get ready for another season, and I think there's some, there's going to be some big moves and some big plays in South Australia and West Australia this year. They, Metro Stars and Bayswater represent those two states very well in the first iteration of the Australia Championship, and there's a lot of big clubs in those two states, and I'm sure after seeing what Metro Stars and Bayswater did in those, in that opening season of the Australia Championship, I'm sure there's a lot of hungry other clubs that want that piece, want to display themselves on the national stage. Not this weekend, but the following weekend, the 7th of March, NPL Tasmania is back down in the Apple Isle. South Hobart represented that state last time. Can they do it again? They get back in action on the 7th of March. And then finally, the last NPL to come back into action is the NPL ACT. That doesn't come back till the March 27th, so you'll get to hear my lovely voice before they take the field again. They're the last NPL competition to start back up for March, and then everyone will be back up and running, and the hunt for the Australia Championship spots will be truly on in all the states across Australia. Though we're a long way from the Australia Championship, and we got to look at the nitty-gritty individual fixtures. So at the recording of the 26th of Feb, these are the most important weekend fixtures coming up. So starting tomorrow night, you have some big games. You obviously have the return of South Australia and West Australia. Now, all these times that I'm stating are local times. So if this is an NPL South Australia, it's in South Australia time. If it's West Australia, it's West Australia time. Queensland time, Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Make sure you just look at where you're from and what games you want to go to. Usually on Google, if you search up NPL WA or NPL New South Wales, they'll come up with the times in your local time frame, so that's very good. And if you ever want to watch these games, I know majority of the NPLs are on YouTube. So if you just search up NPL New South Wales, NPL Northern New South Wales YouTube channel, you'll find these games. Queensland, they're on their own Football Queensland TV. And then I'm not too sure about the other states, but obviously everything's all free, which is great. More visibility on the game. No paywalls from what I know in terms of watching these NPL competition games. So just have a look what is around your state, or if you want to get interested in other states as well, I highly recommend. There's some great games, some great teams that you'll get to fall in love with and find out their stories as well. So, first game we're going to talk about is the opening game of NPL Western Australia. It's Bayswater City versus Balakata at 7 p.m. That's the opening game of NPL West Australia, and what a game that is. Bayswater back in action straight away, defending their premiership. South Australia, their opening game is Croydon versus Para Hills. That's at 7:30 South Australia time. So those two competitions getting kicked off tomorrow night. And then also tomorrow night, you have a very big game in Lions FC and Gold Coast Knights, two teams that have been powerhouse teams in NPL Queensland. That game's at 7:30. On Saturday this weekend, you have an Australia Championship showdown between Apia versus Wollongong. That's at Lambert Park at 5 p.m. So if you want to get a taste of the Oz Championship, or you're missing, those big game feels, watch that one. Apia Wollongong is going to be a great game there. But also, if you look further throughout the night, some other very big games. Campbelltown City versus Metro Stars. Metro's opening game of the NPL South Australia season. That's at 3 p.m. Campbelltown and Metro have gone back and forth in terms of winning the premiership and the championships in South Australia throughout the 2010s. So that's going to be a great game there. And then wrapping up the games on Saturday, it's Brisbane City versus Moreton City Excelsior. Moreton City, obviously, Oz Championship semi-finalists last year. And Brisbane City, they had a great run in the Oz Cup last year. So that's a very good game there. And then the lone game I picked out on Sunday, it's Melbourne City versus Preston Lions. Preston technically should be on 6 points if they didn't have the point deduction. Melbourne City sitting currently second on 4 points, so that's a good game there of two teams that started the season very well. Moving over to next weekend, so the 6th of March to the 8th of March. On the Friday night, just one game I picked out. It's WDSC Wolves versus Moreton City at 7:30. On the Saturday, you have the return of NPL Tasmania. Their opening game is between Launceston United and South Hobart. That game kicking off at 2:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. And then you got some very big games on that Saturday night, the 7th of March. Dandenong Thunder versus Avondale at 7 p.m. Lantern Jaffers versus Broadmeadow Magic at 7. Apia versus Blacktown City, 7:30. And Rockdale versus Sydney Olympic on 7:30. So very big games there across New South Wales, and then also that lone game in Victoria. However, the biggest game in Victoria that weekend is on the 8th of March at 3 p.m. Preston Lions versus Heidelberg United. And if both teams win this weekend, they'll come into that game on that Sunday, both undefeated. Two probably strongest teams in Victoria up until that point. So that's going to be a great game, especially at Janus Steel Stadium as well. They'll feel that out. Heidelberg fans will travel well as well. So that's going to be my game for the weekend. That one, that Preston-Heidelberg one, is very tasty. 13th to the 15th of March, not too many games that caught my eye in this one. The Friday night game is Green Gully, which is the new boys newly promoted from VPL 1. If I got that correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Victorians. Green Gully versus South Melbourne at 7:30. South Melbourne having to travel away. Saturday, you got Davenport City versus Launceston United in 2:30 down in NPL Tasmania. Brisbane City versus Gold Coast Knights at 7 p.m. up in Queensland. And then on Sunday, big game between two Western Sydney rivals in Blacktown City and Marconi at 3 p.m. And then the final weekend before you get to hear another episode from us, the 20th to the 22nd of March. Friday night, you got an Oz Championship showdown between Preston and Avondale. That's kicking off at 8:30 at Janus Steel Stadium. And then some really big games on the Saturday. Saturday, Metro Stars versus Adelaide City at 7 p.m. in South Australia. Now, that's a big game because Metro, I tipped obviously to make a return back to the Oz Championship this year, though if they were to have a competitor, and I was very close to tipping them, but I think Adelaide City will be that main competition for Metro. They were last year. I think Adelaide City have stepped it up coming into this new year, so I don't think it'll be, I think it was a 14-point difference at the end of last season between Metros and Adelaide City. I don't think that's going to be the case this time around, but it's going to be very exciting, that game. Then you got a Brisbane derby between Brisbane City and Brisbane Olympic at 7 p.m. Dandenong Thunder host South Melbourne at 7 p.m. on the 21st of March. And then finally, it's Stirling Macedonia versus Olympic Kingsway in Western Australia at 6 p.m. Australian Western Time. That's a big game because just recently gone, Stirling Macedonia and Olympic Kingsway played in their night series final in Western Australia. Now that's kind of their pre-season cup competition over in Western Australia, and Kingsway looked very good, but Stirling Macedonia got them over in the final. So it's going to be a repeat there, just only 3 rounds into the Western Australia season, so that's going to be a big game there. And then finally on the Sunday, another big game between Sydney United and Blacktown City at 5 p.m. on the 22nd of March. So that's kind of the wrap-up, or preview, I should say, for March. We'll obviously go through these games come next episode, this time next month, and look at the fixtures and how the teams did well. But obviously, I like to give, you guys the games I'm looking at, interested about, and if you're interested too, let me know via tier2talk_TAC, both on Instagram and Twitter. I'd love to know what games you guys are watching, which ones you're at the grounds at. I'll be at the grounds as well, in New South Wales as well. So really excited for another season of NPL. And if you look at those fixtures, every state have got mouth-watering fixtures nearly every weekend. And if they're not in your state, YouTube is there for your convenience to watch all this NPL action. Now, we've got about 20 minutes left of this episode, which is probably just enough time to talk about our final talking point. And it's been the talking point, like I said, of Australian football over the last month. It's been reignited through Football 360's and Bruce Media's new documentary podcast titled Breaking Barriers or Building Blocks. Building Blocks is a podcast, Breaking Barriers is the YouTube documentary. But their idea is they want to take a grassroots club. So it came out yesterday night. That's going to be Berwick City. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I think they're currently sitting in State League 2 in Victoria. So I think it's State League 2, State League 1, MPL 3, MPL 2, and then like the main MPL with South Melbourne and stuff. So it's about 5 tiers deep, if I'm correct, if I've done the math correctly. But their essence is they want to take the club from them, build them up like a Welcome to Wrexham story. If you know the story with Wrexham and where they start in the lower leagues of the English football system and promote up and go to the Premier League. Very similar concept. They want to take a club and go through the entire state Victorian League, get up to the National Premier League, and then hopefully by then they've done a good enough job and the conversation's been talked about that there is some sort of promotion and relegation into the A-League or some way of access into the A-League. Now, if you listen to this podcast, I'm going to assume you know, but I'm going to explain. If you don't, there's no way to get into the A-League right now. It's a closed league. There's no criteria. There's no reward for winning a state or an Oz championship kind of thing. There's no way in. So their philosophy and what they want to do is build up this club and just keep the conversation going about promotion relegation, opening that door, opening, to different levels of Australian football, that they do such a good job that the FA or the APL changes this. And, by the time it's 5, 6 years, 7 years down the track, there is that opportunity for any club around Australia to play in the professional leagues. Now, that's what has started the ignition. And since then, there's been a lot of conversation about it. They came out, Matt Widley, he's the main man behind all of this. He worked for the APL and has been a part of many different bidding process for clubs to try and get into the A-League. If you haven't checked it out, I do highly recommend. If you want to start with the YouTube videos, it's on Football 360. It's 10-minute videos, which is, a nice taster. But if you want to go in depth, they have a podcast as well titled Building Blocks. And they interviewed Vince Rugari week 1. They interviewed the South Melbourne president last week, which was a fantastic chat and a fantastic episode. If you like this conversation about championship and, these clubs, I highly recommend that one as well. But yeah, so they came out with this, and they also came out with their own model of what they would like to see the A-League and promotion relegation work like in this country. It came out with a pyramid in where they have an A1 league, which is the top one, so A League 1, and then A2 league, so A League 2. And it would all be under the A League branding and everything, and it'd be promotion relegation between those two leagues, so professional environment. What people have had an issue with, and they've defended well, I must say, like they've answered all the questions about, backlash about having it still closed, because what happened is there's no relegation from A2. You can't be relegated back into the MPLs or the Australia Championship. You can stay in that professional environment. Yes, you can go up to the A1, and if you get into A1, then you're fine for Asian Champions League spots and being the champions of Australia. But then if you get relegated, you get relegated down into A League 2, and then from there you can't be relegated down. You're still a professional club. Which at first, even I was like, I don't know how well this works. But since then, I've listened to their thoughts and their opinions, and I think it does work for this model. And they said they want to keep building these leagues up until you get so many teams. Say if there's 16 teams in A1, 16 teams in A2, then you create an A3. But still, no one's dropping down into the MPLs. I think the positive of this model is that it allows clubs that when they are ready, they can step up. Because right now, if Preston or South Melbourne, I deem South Melbourne ready to go up into the A-League right now. I'm a Wanderers fan, and I know South Melbourne would beat the Wanderers right now. But the issue is there's no current environment for them to go, hey, we have this, we have the finance, we have the ground, we have the fan base, blah, blah, blah. We want to be a part of it. It's closed. I think what this model or a model like this can do is just open that conversation of any club, if they want to do it and they get investors or whatever, if they go, yep, we can tick this box, this box, this box, let us in. Very similar to what they did for the Oz Championship and finding foundation clubs. Football Australia sent out a nationwide open invitation to anyone wanting information. And it went from 32 teams down to 24, down to 16, and then we got to the final 8. Because they were met with strict criteria of, if you're going to play in this league, you need to meet this, this, and this. I think if they do something very similar to that in the A-League, it could be a possibility. However, with all the positives, and I am very positive about promotion relegation, that's why I do a podcast about the second tier, because I do believe that there is a opportunity to do something with what we saw in the Oz Championship and make it connected with the A-League. I do have some questions, and I want to pose this to you guys as well. So feel free to comment on the Spotify section or on Twitter or on Instagram as well. Do you have some main questions? Yesterday when I did this, first episode, or I thought I was recording, I didn't go off on a tangent, but it wasn't as distinct as what I liked it to be. So I went over, refined, and I got into some questions that I think outline my points a bit better. First question. What role does the Oz Championship play in this future promotion relegation? Now, with this, what I mean by that is the Oz Championship, in its current form, best to stay in its current form to connect with the MPL, get teams into the Oz Championship, and then find clubs to promote that way? Or does the Oz Championship turn into what it was set out to do, into a home and away system, and then once that is home and away system, then do we connect it with the A-League? So in its current form, does it stay as this connection to the MPL, or does it need to evolve into, the connection pathway to the A-League? Or does it stay as that connection with the MPL and something new comes in between the A-League and the Championship to fill that void and connect with the A-League? Ties in with my second question. If you're in charge, do you connect the MPL and the Oz Championship like it is now? MPL clubs have that possibility to get promoted, in a sense, into the Oz Championship, or do you connect the Championship and the A-League? Because right now, it's that postseason tournament, and you can't expect clubs to go into the MPL, win their MPL, qualify for the Oz Championship that way, and then play a full home and away season in the Oz Championship. It's not sustainable for the clubs, not sustainable for the players, anything like that. So do you leave it as this kind of MPL connection into the Oz Championship, and then the Oz Championship is its own thing as that postseason tournament? Or do you connect it to the A-League, just like what I was saying? Make it that home and away season competition, play 16 20, 24, 25, 26, however many games in the season at the same time as the championship, as the A-League, I should say. And then they run concurrently, and then you can possibly open that promotion relegation between the A-League and the Oz Championship. So that's kind of my first 2 points, I must say. The other thing I must say as well is that there's no perfect solution for this. We work in a world and a footballing world in Australia that, it's very hard to implement something like this overnight. MPLs play during winter. A-League plays during summer. If you move the A-League back into winter, what does that do for the A-League? If you can't move grassroots out of winter, grassroots is stuck in that winter competition. So how do you maneuver that? Do you have two professional leagues run over summer and do promotion relegation that way? And then the MPL clubs do their own thing during the winter? There's no perfect answer, but I think what is more should be the conversation is that the conversation is needing to be have. The great thing is that you hear a lot of different opinions about promotion relegation in Australia. Everyone has it. Everyone has that thought. Everyone aspires to have what Europe and all the great football nations have around the world. We want that jeopardy, or we aspire to have that jeopardy for doing bad, have that promotion for doing well. People won't say it's the lock and solution to make Australia football number one. There's people out there that won't say that. But I still think even though it has so many problems, Australian football, everyone would still love and aspire to have some form of promotion relegation, because that's what makes football. Hell, I play Football Manager for one reason, and it's to play promotion relegation in Australia. I bought Football Manager or got Football Manager for Christmas, and I made a full 3 tiers of Australian footballing in Football Manager, and that's what I play. I don't play Premier League. I don't do anything like that. I, watch it realistically. I watch them out, or I pick a team like Blacktown, or hell, I even put Darwin Olympic in there and build them up. Everyone loves the story of promotion relegation, and I think it's important to have these conversations, to hear other people's opinions, listen to that, and just keep, this conversation going. Because it's been time and time again of it will come into the media and then it will fade away. And then we'll come back and then we'll fade away. So I think if we consistently have this talk about promotion relegation, what's the next step for Australian football? How do we benefit Australian football? How's the ecosystem benefit of having some sort of promotion relegation? I think that ultimately helps the game overall in Australia, and it gets us fans what we want more. And I think that is, this idea of promotion relegation, multiple leagues, multiple teams, teams having the opportunity to do what every team wants to do and win and compete at the highest level and ultimately be champions of the country one day. The next question I have about promotion relegation, to kind of bring it down, is, franchise versus foundation. How do you go forward about that? A-League's been built off franchise clubs and a franchise league and building clubs up in specific markets or markets that do well, where you have so many versus what the Oz Championship did, and pick clubs that are already established in communities, in regions, with fans, with financial backing, and go that way. How do you go forward with a promotion relegation? I see it, if I can add my own little opinion, I try to be factual in this show, but if I add my own little opinion, I think if we are to do a promotion relegation, it's a world where both need to work. I would definitely say it's more 80-20 on 80% being foundation clubs and 20% being franchise clubs, but I still think there is a world where franchise clubs can support the A-League and tap into markets that aren't currently there. I think, a Canberra United has been in talks for years. There needs to be a Canberra team in there. Tasmania, whether it's South Hobart or whether it's a new Tasmanian team, you could have both realistically. If you're having 2 leagues, why not have both? Why not have a franchise club for Tasmania and then have a South Hobart? In Queensland, bring back North Queensland Fury as a club. But then also, if you go to Gold Coast, put in a Gold Coast Knights. I think it works hand in hand. I think in Adelaide, yes, add another team in Adelaide, but not another franchise team. Promote Metro Stars, promote Adelaide City, clubs very established. Western Australia, you could have another franchise clubs in Western Australia, but you could also promote a Bayswater City, a Perth Azura. There are so many clubs in Australian football that are there or almost there to take that step up into a professional environment. However, I still think there's a world where there's markets where you go, look, you can have an NPL club step up, but I think also it could benefit from just starting scratch and having areas shown a club to follow kind of thing. I think Canberra's a specific example for that. You look at Canberra, I think Canberra United could be that club to rejuvenate that whole area. But then you go to Wollongong. You don't create a franchise club in Wollongong. You promote the Wolves. People have been talking about promoting the Wolves forever. So I think it's that sort of world as well, in where you can have both, but ultimately relying on your past to create your future in football and Australia. My final point is the relationship between the FA and the APL. The APL runs the A-League, the FA runs the Oz Championship, and basically all the NPLs. So how does that relationship be rekindled, and how does that relationship work for the betterment of the sport? Because ultimately, they both want what's best for the sport. They want what's best for their brands, for their clubs, for the whole sport, how they work together. And I think that's one area that really needs to be solved first, in order to have greater and in-depth more conversations about promotion and relegation. Now, the positive, I must say, and I had a talk with someone last Friday that's very well connected in the Australian footballing media landscape, and they said that within the next 5 years, that there's going to be a real change in direction and possible movements in Australian football. He didn't necessarily talk about, promotion relegation, but you have the commercial rights and the broadcast rights for the A-League and the Matildas and Socceroos coming up or expiring. How does that go? Do they go under the same roof in the coming years? Clubs, leagues, how do we promote them? How do we make the A-League stronger? How do we make the Oz Championship stronger? So he was saying that in the next 5 years, there's something that's going to be changed. And I think what is at the start and what is a benefit at the moment is both the FA and the APL both have new CEOs. They both have come in over the Christmas-December period, and they've started in 2026. And I think if these new CEOs for both the FA and the APL can work together, build the games in their own companies, but then also talk dialogue between the FA and the APL, I do think there's this great window of opportunity to do something great in football. And I bring up that key word again in opportunity, as I said at the start of the episode, is that I'm a diehard Football Australia fan. And, you look at what the NRL does, you look at the AFL does, and you're like, if football in this country got it right, I don't think the NRL or the AFL could possibly compete with some of the stuff we do if we get it right. It came out during the week or 2 weeks ago that we have 1.9 million participants for football, the most in the country. So at a grassroots level, we are the number one sport. How do we make that into a professional environment, a commercial environment? How do we get people to come to stadium, to aspire to go from that grassroots and play professionally in their own country as well? So those are my main talking points about promotion relegation. I did better than yesterday and where I kind of got more off tangent. But again, like I said, if you haven't checked out the Breaking Barriers documentary on Football 360, highly recommend to do it, as, just more content as well about Australian football. We don't have enough of it. Sutherland Sharks made a great docu series. There are 2 episodes in. Watch that. Or if you know a club in your local state is doing their own little documentary series, watch it. There are so many great stories at the NPL level that, need to be shined a light on. And I think having these conversations about promotion relegation, about the future of Australian football, it only benefits the sport, and it gives us fans, the belief that something could happen. If you looked over the last 20 years since the A-League or even the NSL areas, there's been a lot of disappointments and a lot of what could have been and could have been. We've had some great times and some great highs, but I think there's been time and time again where we've missed a step or we've made a wrong move in the sport. And I think these next 5-year period, even thinking 2030, what could we get done before 2030? I think there is a great opportunity there for something to be done, and for conversations like these to be back up in the media, in the pubs, in just general conversations and stuff like this to actually start taking place. Now, that will kind of wrap up our episode for February. Again, I apologize for the delay in this episode. Audio equipment, I've already checked, it's up and running, so this episode is coming out. Obviously, you've listened to me rant for 50 minutes, so obviously it has come out. Our next guaranteed episode will be coming out the 25th of March, so this time next month, the last Wednesday of the month. If you listened to the first episode of the year, you heard me talk about the Championship Pursuit episodes or style of episodes I want to do. I've been trying to get clubs on board with, taking interviews and talking about this sort of stuff. Now, it's harder to do than what I first thought. Interview stalls or emails don't get read kind of thing. So still definitely trying to get these stories out to you guys, but it's just getting a bit harder than what I thought. If you guys have any clubs or suggestions of clubs or states you want me to reach out to, definitely please shoot me a message. I'm more than happy to do it. If there's a story to tell, I'd love to tell it. Keep an eye out on social medias as well over the course of March. We're getting more back into the rapper things as well. So you'll be able to see more from me, both on a visual point of view and also just our normal statistics and stuff like that. If you've gotten to this point, I always highly encourage and implore you to leave 5 stars on Spotify, follow on Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, all these sorts of things so that you get to stay up to date with what we're doing. Yes, it's the quieter months. Yes, NPL isn't the main conversation, but I know Australia Cup is coming back into action. I've got my Australia Cup game on midway through March, so the Australia Cup is definitely back in action. Not so much for the NPL clubs right now. It's still very much in that grassroots stage, but you never know when Australia Cup is coming back into things or when NPL news will take front and center of Football Australia. So that will be our episode. Thank you very much for listening. I always thank you guys for listening. The first episode did fantastic in terms of listenerships and people just picking up where we left off, and that's where we hope to do at the end of the month every month, up until the World Cup, and then World Cup will be the World Cup and be fantastic, and then it will be into the end of the NPL and into the Oz Championship again. But I'm sure there's plenty of news and plenty of more conversations like we had today. If you liked what we did in terms of today's episode, bit of facts about the fixtures and results, but then also talking points, let me know. If you want me to talk about something different, let me know. I'm all open for ideas. I'm definitely trying to get interviews and guests on the episode as well, so it's not just me talking for an hour. So any suggestions, any thoughts you have on these episodes, I'm more than happy to listen to. But yeah, until next month, until the end of March, enjoy the first month of autumn. Summer has sadly come and gone. It's about to pour rain in Sydney here as I finish this episode, but enjoy the first month of March. Enjoy the NPL action. Obviously, the Women's Asian Cup as well is starting up this coming weekend, so go the Matildas. Hopefully we can win it all. But yeah, until the end of March, guys, I'll talk to you then. Bye.